There are some people who believe that you can change your sexual orientation. For instance, if you are a homosexual, people believe that you can change into a heterosexual. There are people in the religious circles who generally have this belief. And of course, there are people who claim to be ex-gay or ex-homosexual. And these are people who formally identified as gay or lesbian. And due to their religious beliefs, they have denounced being homosexual and they say that they're ex-gay. And these people generally focus on homosexuality in a very degrading or negative perspective. They don't consider homosexuality as a natural sexual orientation, for example. And I wanted to talk a bit about a lot of the hypocrisy that I see with people in the religious circles. And there's actual people who, when you have a conversation with them, or if you hear them talk about gay people and changing your sexual orientation, you'd be surprised a lot of the disparity that they have regarding changing your sexual orientation. For this video, the focus is on how I've mostly seen men have this perspective. I'm sure there's women who may think it as well, but mainly it's men. And men will think that once a man has what they call quote unquote gay sex, end quote, then they have been tarnished forever. And when they are used to being with another man sexually, they can't convert back to being with a woman. And most men do not believe that a man can be bisexual. And that's how they feel about men who are same-sex attracted. But they have a completely opposite view when it comes to women who are homosexual or lesbians. And I will hear men say, well, a woman can be bisexual. And they also will say, well, if a woman is lesbian, she can end up with a man. She'll eventually be with the man. And when he says be with the man, he could mean either just sexually involved with the man, or she'll ultimately end up marrying a man. And they like to say that a man is able to convert a woman into being a heterosexual. And this is very contradictory, because if you're a religious person, aren't you supposed to have a unilateral belief on how God deals with his interactions with his people? In other words, God won't say males are only capable of doing this and females are only capable of doing that. And I'm not speaking about the reproductive system, because the reproductive system, we know that the woman has a womb and she's able to bear children and reproduce life. And we know that a man does not have a womb, so he cannot become pregnant, he cannot bear children and deliver children. But what I'm referring to is morality, because a lot of the religious people, they don't think that it's moral to be a homosexual. So in the sense of them being a religious person, if homosexuality is not moral, then your belief supposedly comes from the God that you worship. So if the rule is that God says homosexuality is immoral, should he have that same standard for both genders, for male and female? If that is the way God sees homosexuality, then it should be inclusive of both male and female. So why is it that the religious people, and specifically the religious guys, always show a difference between the genders? So they say the male homosexual, that it is completely impossible for him to turn into a heterosexual. But the female homosexual or the lesbian, it is completely possible for her to turn into a heterosexual. These statements that a lot of these religious people make are very hypocritical, and they really don't make any sense. And if you are religious, you should be getting your moral standards from the God that you worship. And it should not show any variation. And that's why I know that these people don't really rely on their religious beliefs. They rely on their own personal opinion. And they like to use their own manipulation and control tactics to explain away homosexuality. But they know that homosexuality exists. They know that it's a real sexual orientation, but they don't want to deal with the truth about homosexuality. And so the way that they maneuver around it is they make up their own rules about how people who are homosexual should conduct themselves, or how they should ultimately become heterosexual. And honestly, these men who say that a woman can change from a lesbian into a heterosexual, or they say that she can be bisexual, it is simply because these men want to be able to have sex with lesbian women. They want to be able to have access to lesbian women sexually. They're not interested in other males, because these men who think like this, these religious men, they're heterosexual males. Now, you could say, well, maybe some of them are bisexual males. Well, bisexual men have a better understanding about sexuality than heterosexual men who are religious. Because for one, bisexual men know that bisexuality exists in both genders, male and female. Whereas a heterosexual man believes that bisexuality does not exist with men, and that it can only exist with women. And then secondly, bisexual men understand that sexuality can be fluid, and they understand that there's different variations in sexual orientation. And they do not believe that there is only one sexual orientation, which is heterosexuality. And they also do not believe that men can only be one or the other, either homosexual or heterosexual. And then lastly, bisexual men do not believe that all homosexual men remain homosexual only because it is impossible for them to convert to being a heterosexual. Homosexual men and bisexual men believe that your sexual orientation is always your sexual orientation. It doesn't go back and forth, or it doesn't rely on a religious belief to determine what the outcome of their sexual orientation will be. Meaning, people who have this religious belief system that you can change from being a homosexual to a heterosexual, they base this off of the fact that they think that God considers homosexuality to be immoral, which leads them to believe that people were always originally heterosexual and there was some malfunction that caused them to become homosexual. Well, homosexual people and bisexual people, whether male or female, we don't rely on those religious beliefs, nor do we accept those religious beliefs. We don't think like most heterosexual people do. And we definitely don't follow along the same religious pattern or belief systems. I know I don't. And I identify as a lesbian. And I'm not being biased about how I believe sexual orientation works simply because I'm a lesbian. No, I know myself. And I'm not a religious person. I am a spiritual person and I use common sense. Men who think men can't change being gay, but lesbians can, is the title of this video. The key word in this title is men. It has nothing to do with God. Men like to think that they know what God is thinking, and they like to project or play God and manipulate and control people who they should not even be concerned about. Why is your focus as a heterosexual man or a heterosexual woman being fixated on homosexual people? And then you want to pick and choose which gender can change their sexual orientation and which gender cannot change their sexual orientation. It's all 100% all about your own selfish beliefs. And it's ridiculous for people on podcasts, people who have platforms, whether it's in the religious circles, wherever they are speaking and teaching and preaching this dogma, they really need to sit down and close their mouths. Because when you are teaching from a place of selfishness, control, and manipulation, you're not really concerned about the welfare of people, and you're not really interested in their livelihood. You are showing favoritism between the gender and sex of people. And you also are very ignorant about sexual orientation. Sexuality and sexual orientation is given to us. We do not choose our sexual orientation. It is a gift. And sexual orientation is not to be manipulated, mistreated, or abused. We are to respect people. And when we do not, then this causes a lot of issues in society between the genders. And it causes people to not trust people. We need to be more considerate of people and learn from others instead of forming your own bias and opinion about another person's sexual orientation or their gender or sex. If people learn to be more loving and considerate and well-rounded and self-aware human beings, then this kind of statement and belief and religious dogma that is spreading around like a plague would not exist. Men can say all day long that they think men are permanently homosexual and that it's impossible for a man to be bisexual. And they can say that women are able to be bisexual and that lesbians are able to convert to being a heterosexual. Yes, you can say that, and you do say those things. However, it does not mean that it's true. And people are going to be homosexual regardless to whether you like it or not. My name is Giselle Wallace, lesbian life coach and author. Thank you for listening.